In the headlines, U.S. President Barack Obama says he's launching a systematic campaign of airstrikes against the Islamic State in Iraq as well as Syria. The Korean government announces its first cigarette price hike in 10 years. It's proposing an 80% markup to curb the country's high smoking rate. And political parties in Korea still see no progress in their wrangling over the so-called Ferry Bill, only mounting public pressure to finish negotiations and get back to work.
Welcome to Primetime News. Hope you enjoyed the holiday. Live from Seoul, I'm Sean Lim.
And I'm Kang Chery. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. We begin with the U.S. President Barack Obama's strategy to stamp out the growing threat of Islamic militants in Syria and Iraq.
Our Shin Se-min has the details of Washington's plans to send more U.S. military personnel to the region.
Our objective is clear. We will degrade and ultimately destroy ISIL through a comprehensive and sustained counterterrorism strategy.
In a 15-minute televised speech, U.S. President Barack Obama laid out his plan to destroy the militant group that calls itself the Islamic State. His plan includes both military and diplomatic efforts. On the military front, Obama said an additional 475 U.S. troops would be sent to Iraq to support forces there. The U.S. president, however, also emphasized to the war-weary American public that those being dispatched were not combat troops. On the diplomatic front, Obama said he would be forming what he called a broad coalition of at least 40 nations to confront the militant threat by launching airstrikes on strategic targets and assisting the Iraqi government. Although President Obama said there was no indication that the Islamic State poses an imminent threat in the United States, he did not rule out the possibility of there being an attack on U.S. interests overseas. In his speech, Obama was unequivocal and strong in his language, in stark comparison to last month when he said that the U.S. didn't have a strategy for dealing with the militants.
We will hunt down terrorists who threaten our country wherever they are. That means I will not hesitate to take action against ISIL in Syria as well as Iraq. If you threaten America, you will find no safe haven.
President Obama called on the U.S. Congress to back his moves and approve the release of resources to train and equip local forces for their fight. Ahead of the speech on Wednesday, President Obama spoke to Saudi Arabian King Abdullah by phone to garner support. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
And while President Obama was speaking in Washington, his top diplomat was in the Middle East, drumming up support for the U.S. plan to confront the Islamic State. Our Park Ji-won has more.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry visited Baghdad on Wednesday, a matter of days after Iraq's new Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi was sworn in. Meeting with the new Iraqi leader, Kerry vowed U.S. support for the new government's battle against Islamic State militants.
We're prepared to take, not only with respect to ISIL, which is critical, and your own military's commitment to reconstituting itself and to being prepared to take the fight to ISIL, but also your commitment to the broad reforms that are necessary in Iraq.
Kerry stressed that IS is a vicious terrorist organization, and the U.S. and many other countries will help counter the threat posed by the group.
There is literally no place for their barbarity in the modern world. This is a fight that the Iraqi people must win, but it's also a fight that the rest of the world needs to win with them. And it's a fight the United States and the rest of the world need to support every single step of the way.
As Kerry was meeting high-level officials Wednesday, 3 car bombs exploded in eastern Baghdad, killing about 17 people and injuring dozens of others. Meanwhile, Russia's state news agency RIA Novosti reported of a possible nuclear threat by the IS militants. The news agency quoted comments by Andrei Novikov, the head of the Commonwealth of Independent States Anti-Terrorism Center, that suggested IS might have a nuclear capability. He said the terror group declared its intent to use nuclear weapons in June, and about 40 kilograms of uranium compounds had been stolen by insurgents from Mosul University in Iraq in July. However, atomic experts at the UN do not consider it to be a major threat, stressing that it would take years for IS to develop nuclear weapons. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Now, the South Korean government has voiced its support for U.S. President Barack Obama's strategy for more airstrikes and coordinated action to defeat the Islamic State in Syria and Iraq. Although officials are saying no military backup this time, a foreign ministry official told reporters that additional humanitarian support is under consideration. Seoul already announced last month its plan to provide a combined $1.2 million in aid to help Iraqis displaced by the conflict.
Korea's high smoking rate has long been blamed on the low prices of cigarettes here in Korea, but that may soon change.
Exactly. The Korean government announced its first cigarette price hike in 10 years today. Our Hwang Jae has the details on what may be coming.
In just a couple of months, smokers in Korea may have to pay almost double what they currently do for a pack of cigarettes. While the change is being welcomed by many, it's also facing strong opposition.
I think the price hike could lessen the damage of secondhand smoke, since many of my friends say they will quit smoking if cigarette prices go up. People will reconsider buying cigarettes if they're more expensive.
When we raise cigarette prices to a level on par with other countries, we should also look at the welfare level of those countries as well. But the government's logic is way too simple, that smokers will quit smoking if tobacco prices rise.
The government announced Thursday that it will push through plans to raise the price of a pack by 2,000 won to 4,500 won, or roughly $4.30 starting next year. The aim is to cut the country's high smoking rate. Around 44% of adult males currently smoke, which is the highest among OECD member countries. Cigarette prices in Korea, however, are among the cheapest in the world, standing at just around one-third the OECD average. The price has been held steady for 10 years, but the health minister says the time for change is now.
We plan to introduce a pricing system where cigarette prices will be pegged to the nation's inflation rate. We hope this proves effective in dropping the smoking rate over the long term.
The ministry's goal is to cut the smoking rate for men to 29% by 2020. Other anti-smoking measures laid out by the government include mandatory warning images on cigarette packaging and banning retailers from posting any kind of cigarette advertisement. Before any changes take effect, they will have to be approved by the National Assembly, and with both ruling and opposition parties raising concerns that the measures will burden smokers in the low-income bracket, passage is far from a certainty right now. Hwang Jae, Arirang News.
You know, I heard some smokers are stocking up on their cigarette supplies. Actually, a convenience store saw the cigarette sales soaring by more than 30% yesterday compared to the same day last week.
Well, you know, people stock up on meat and they put it in the freezer.
Exactly.
I've seen people put cigarettes in the refrigerator, so I guess they could stock up. But in order for this price hike to actually go into effect, we do have to see it pass the National Assembly, but the way things are over there, there's going to be another thing for the parties to fight over.
What's the controversy? I mean, this is to what? To keep Koreans healthy, right? Stop smoking because it's expensive, no?
Right. That's one way to look at it, but apparently the main opposition party is saying that this increase in cigarette prices is going to come at the expense of lower income bracket citizens, since they make up more of the smokers, and that this money is actually being used to
so it's
offset a revenue shortfall.
So heavier toll on the lower income bracket.
An indirect tax is the argument.
You know, speaking of politics, I mean, politics everywhere, but speaking of politics, I'm not even sure this cigarette price law bill will ever get any attention, right?
Exactly. If the way things are going now, lawmakers are still trying to work through their differences over the so-called Ferry Bill as pressure from the public is building to reach common ground. And for more on that, we have our Cheo-sun with this report.
With neither side able to stand further public criticism over the months-long political standoff stemming from a bill to probe April's ferry disaster, the floor leaders from the ruling and opposition parties resumed talks Thursday to try iron out their differences. The ruling party wanted the opposition to clearly state its position on the previous bipartisan agreement on the bill, which the opposition now says should be renegotiated with the ferry victim families. The families are demanding a stronger voice in the investigation process, but the ruling party says that would violate the judicial system. Urging the opposition to cooperate in swiftly passing a number of economic and reform-related bills, the ruling party also wants the parliamentary speaker to intervene.
As the National Assembly law states, we ask the parliamentary speaker to exercise his authority to vote on those bills.
The opposition, for its part, continues to pressure the ruling side to first address the ferry bill.
The president, the presidential office, and the ruling party must resolve the Seoul ferry bill without giving further thought. The bill to find the truth behind the ferry disaster is one that concerns all Korean people.
In a move to get parliamentary business back in order, National Assembly Speaker Geunhye will request the House Steering Committee on Friday to set an agenda for the current regular session. The floor leaders on Friday, or by the weekend at the latest, will give it another try to reach a compromise. Choi-yu-sun, Arirang News.
And as for who will lead the opposition, NPAD floor leader Park Kyung-sun, who's been filling in after her party's co-leader stepped down in July, says an outsider will be recruited to lead reform efforts, but it remains unclear whether Park will remain as emergency co-chair of the party. Korea, China, and Japan held a senior-level trilateral meeting in Seoul on Thursday, the first of its kind in 10 months. The officials at the meeting agreed on the need for summit talks, but said they need more time to discuss the specifics. Our Hwang Sung-hee has more.
Amid deepening diplomatic friction, senior officials from Korea, China, and Japan met in Seoul Thursday, seeking fresh momentum in their trilateral cooperation. Divided over historical and territorial issues, the three neighbors have not held a summit since last year and met today at Korea's request.
The Republic of Korea has made strenuous efforts to resolve such a situation, either by hosting related meetings or by suggesting various constructive alternatives, with a sense of duty to continue working toward keeping and reinforcing trilateral cooperation.
The three countries have expanded exchanges in areas such as economy, trade, and culture over the past 15 years, but regional rows are hampering further growth.
At the same time, our cooperation has seen difficulties and setbacks, which affected the general atmosphere of the trilateral cooperation.
Each country's chief diplomat agreed the next trilateral meeting should be conducted at a higher level to secure further progress in their cooperation. But despite their agreement on this, the three officials failed to shake hands on when, where, and how the much-delayed summit will take place. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
President Park Geun-hye is set for a week-long trip to Canada and the United States next Saturday. In New York, she will address the United Nations General Assembly and lay out her plan to restore peace and stability in Northeast Asia. And in Canada, she is expected to focus on bilateral economic ties on the heels of the recently signed Korea-Canada Free Trade Agreement. With the Asian Games set to kick off in Incheon in just over a week's time, the first batch of North Korea's 94 members touched down at Incheon International Airport this Thursday evening. The group included North Korea's Olympic Committee chief Chang Soo-myung, as well as its football and rowing teams. The remainder of its delegation will continue to arrive throughout next week before the start of the event next Friday.
Instead of going through the hassle of buying a one-way transportation ticket or paying cash for every ride, millions of people in Korea are using a prepaid public transportation card, also known as the Tmoney card. Our Kwon-soa reports on how the technology inside these cards is continuously evolving along with its expansion abroad.
A tough commute in Southeast Asia. This is just one of the Korea Smart Card Corporation's recent ventures into the global market. The company's prepaid transportation card, the Tmoney card, which launched 10 years ago, is already a staple for millions of commuters in Korea.
When I used to pay for my fees with cash, it was inconvenient, but not anymore since I use the Tmoney card. All I have to do is charge it.
The most convenient part of the Tmoney card is its integration system. Whether you're traveling by subway, bus, or taxi, this one card can get you where you want to go. And it's also selling overseas. Korea Smart Card told Arirang News that Tmoney America was established in New York last month to expand its service in the U.S. The company's first service abroad in Wellington, New Zealand, has been running since 2008.
When cards are held against the Tmoney card reader there, the settlement data is sent to Korea, and those results are transferred back to New Zealand. That's remote management service through cutting-edge technology.
Since it uses NFC technology, a short-range wireless technology, the business opportunities expand beyond the scope of transportation. It makes micropayments at more than 50,000 businesses possible, including convenience stores and vending machines. Korea Smart Card says it's hoping to eventually become the world's #1 smart mobility and payment service provider and is already in talks to expand its service in another location by the end of this year. Kwon-soa, Arirang News.
Dust is a constant nuisance in our lives, and it may also be taking a toll on our health. Researchers in Korea say the dust on our beds could greatly increase the chances of lung-related illnesses, even more so than smoking. Connie Kim tells us more.
This woman has been living in her apartment for more than 10 years and cleans constantly over concerns of dust.
I tend to cough a lot in dusty places, so I change my bed sheets once every 2 or 3 weeks.
Her concerns are not unwarranted and may be helping to keep her free of lung diseases. New studies conducted by local universities show that the dust in our beds can have serious effects. According to study results, the ultra-fine particles found in beds can increase the risk of asthma up to 10 times. Continued exposure can also raise the risk of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease by up to 8 times. And while smokers have 3 times the risk of getting lung cancer compared to non-smokers, a dusty bedroom raises the risk by up to 40 times.
If there is a continuous exposure to bed dust, airways can be narrowed and destroyed, which can eventually cause lung cancer.
Experts say the best way to reduce the threat is to change your sheets regularly and keep your bedrooms well ventilated by opening the windows from time to time. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
The final verdict is in. Oscar Pistorius, the South African Paralympic champion, has been cleared of all murder charges of his girlfriend who was killed at his place last year.
With more, we turn now to Paul Yi at the News Center. Paul, this case has been at the center of international attention for months. What were some of the final remarks by the judge?
Well, Judge Toko Misa Masipa of South Africa's High Court said Thursday that prosecutors failed to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Pistorius was guilty of premeditated murder. Judge Masipa questioned the reliability of several witnesses and raised concerns of police contaminating the crime scene. She accused Pistorius of being a very poor witness, but stressed it did not mean he was guilty.
While during evidence in chief, he seemed composed and logical, with the result that his evidence flowed and made sense. While giving his version under cross-examination, he lost his composure.
The double amputee had shot dead Riva Steenkamp on Valentine's Day last year, claiming he thought she was an intruder in his home. Pistorius could still be convicted of culpable homicide, which carries a sentence of up to 15 years in jail. And turning now to the stars, 3 astronauts have returned home after completing a 6-month mission aboard the International Space Station. American Steven Swanson, along with 2 Russian cosmonauts, safely landed in Kazakhstan early Thursday after hurling back to Earth on the Soyuz capsule. NASA said the trio had worked for nearly 170 days in cramped quarters aboard the ISS, conducting research in science and technology. The U.S. Space Agency said the results of the research will be used in long-term space travel as it prepares to send 2 astronauts to the orbiting laboratory next year in its eventual manned mission to Mars. And finally, Apple's newest iPhone model is set to launch around the world next week, and it appears that people in Japan are already lining up to get their hands on this latest gadget. Tech enthusiasts began setting up camp outside the Tokyo Apple store on Wednesday, just a day after the U.S. tech giant announced its latest smartphones in San Francisco. While some Japanese media speculate the crowd in Tokyo had been hired by Apple, many say they're just die-hard fans.
I'm counting down the days left to the iPhone 6 launch on my t-shirt.
According to industry experts, the larger screened iPhones measured at 4.7 and 5.5 inches will be hitting the Korean market later next month. And that wraps up our look at international stories making headlines around the world. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
Hello and welcome to sports. Now there's just about a week before the 17th Asian Games in Incheon, and South Korea's athletes are itching to show the fruits of their labor and training. Athletes and relevant officials gathered for a team launching ceremony at Olympic Park in Seoul, and there, Park Sun-ho, the head of the South Korea's delegation, expressed confidence in achieving their main goals, which is to place second in medals for the 5th straight Asiad, behind China of course, and to win at least 90 gold medals there. Now, they've won over 90 golds twice before, both when hosting the Games in 1986 and 2002. So if the trend persists, they should surpass their mark in Incheon as well. And shifting to South Korea football, new national team senior team manager Uli Stilica has chosen 3 Koreans for his coaching staff. They are Shin Tae-yong, who acted as interim manager for September's friendly matches, alongside Park Geunhye and Kim Bong-soo, both holdovers from previous manager Hong Myung-bo's run. Meanwhile, Stilica flew out of the country on Thursday, but will be back in time for the Asian Games football round of 16 on September 24th. Now let's get to baseball. It's Thursday's top KBO matchup between the Nexen Heroes and SK Wyverns in Incheon. SK, or rather Nexen, has Kim Dae-woo on the mound, and SK has Choi Byung-yong. First inning, Kim's tagged for 3 runs as SK's Park Jung-kwon and Han Dong-min connect. Now he's pulled in the second inning for Oh Jae-young, who also gives up 3 runs, one of them earned. SK's up 6-0. Now that's all before Nexen's Lee Sung-yeol brings one home in the 4th inning. But SK adds 2 as Park hits another 2-run single. Lee Myung-gi adds a 2-run homer in the 5th inning. And at the end of it, Choi Byung-yong, he gets the complete game win for SK, 11-2. And looking at the other games, Tusan leads Hanwha 11-6 in the top of the 9th inning. As for the other games, Samsung comes back to win against Kia 5-4. And meanwhile, Lotte takes down NC 5-1. Now to the FIBA World Cup. France stunned one of the tournament favorites and hosts Spain, winning their quarterfinal match 65-52. Boris Diaw's 15 points led the way in the upset as the hosts broke down in the fourth quarter, being outscored 23-9. France will now face Serbia on Friday in the semifinals. Meanwhile, the United States will play Lithuania in their semifinal contest. And that wraps it up for now. This has been Stephen Che. Have a great night, but first, your weather updates.
Hope you all had a wonderful Chuseok. I'm Kim Bo-kyung with your weather updates. Now, it was a beautiful autumn-like day with fairly breezy conditions and cloudy skies nationwide. Now, I know that many of you have been hesitant in heading outdoors due to the sweltering hot conditions, but this week that won't be a problem because we are in for some nice and breezy weather. On Friday, sporadic showers could sprinkle over the eastern coast, but besides that, conditions should be similar to today, starting off with a cool morning before the mercury rises to the high 20s. On to Friday's readings. Seoul hits 28 while Daegu and Busan reach 26. Taking a look at other places, Daejeon and Jeju make it to 25, Dokdo and Manggyeong to 23 and 24. That does it for me for now, but I'll be back with more updates after midnight. See you then.
All right, thanks, Po-kyung. And that's tonight's broadcast of Primetime News. Thanks for watching. I'm Sean Lim.
And I'm Kang Chery. See you again, same time tomorrow at 10 p.m. Korea time. Bye-bye.